What did the weird kid in your school do that you'll never forget? This girl decided she wanted to be pregnant. She proceeded to ask probably half the people in our high school if they would impregnate her. And then, when that didn't work, she bought a Ziploc bag and asked for guys to jizz in it. Everyone called her Sperm Bank after that, and I honestly can't remember her real name. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and weigh in right away. We're off to a great start here with a crazy girl. There are other ways to drop out of high school if you're looking for an excuse. And also, jizzing in a Ziploc bag, it doesn't really work like that. So at least do your research if you want to get knocked up without having sex. Story 2. Hissed at people in the halls and then bit someone. Edit. Geez, I didn't expect so much attention, but let me answer some questions. Said girl went to my middle school in Chandler, Arizona. It seems like every school has a hisser. LMAO, but she didn't think she was a snake. She was a cat girl. Story 3. 7th grade. Guy didn't have a pen or pencil for the test, and the teacher wouldn't give him one. You need to be prepared, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the dude took out a paperclip, straightened it out, stabbed himself, and started doing the test using his blood as ink. He was quickly sent to the nurse's office. Edit. Whoa, thanks for the love, everyone. It was kind of a sad situation. The teacher shouldn't have done that, and I think the student was picked on a lot and not very stable in the first place. Yeah, I'm getting like Harry Potter vibes from this one where, spoiler alert, Harry had to write standards or notes with a special quill, and the quill basically cut into his hand and forced him to write with his own blood. So I don't know, maybe this kid's a Harry Potter fan, or if this happened before the year, 2005, whatever year that book came out, maybe J.K. Rowling drew inspiration from this. LOL. Story 4. There was this really mentally effed up kid I could probably write a book about. He went through a phase where he was obsessed with JFK. Printed out pictures of him and taped them to everything. His binder, truck, locker, etc. IDK what happened, but later that year all those pictures changed to pictures of Hitler. He referred to this as the time that, quote, the devil overtook him with evil. He did this same crap with William Shatner and a teacher at our school, but the bizarre satanic Hitler obsession takes the cake. He was also banned from the computers because the library lady caught him jerking it to adult content. Story 5. At an all-school assembly during my freshman year, a motivational speaker posed an easy rhetorical question to the crowd, and the weird kid in my grade unnecessarily shouted out the answer to every bored person's sudden delight. For some reason, trying to maintain his authority, the speaker asked our weird kid, "What's your name, son?" Without pause, the weird kid stood up from his chair and loudly proclaimed, "My name is Booger!" This announcement was met with raucous applause and laughter from the entire student body. It was gloriously random and weird. From then on, the weird kid was known only as Booger in our small town. It fit him better than Sean, and he effing owned that name until graduation. Story 6. There was this huge guy, tall and wide, in our classes. To support his impressive body, he ate a lot. He'd bring an entire roll of cookies, like 20 plus, and stack them on one side of his desk. Then he would take one bite out of cookie number 1 and put it to the other side of his desk. Then he would take one bite out of the next cookie and place that one on top of cookie number 1. He'd go through the whole stack until all cookies were partially eaten and in a neat stack on the other side of his desk. Then he would do it again. Take one bite of the top cookie and place that in the original side of his desk. Bite the next cookie, etc. After maybe 15 minutes of biting and snacking, the whole lot was gone. Now, we weren't even supposed to eat in class, but he always got away with it somehow. Story 7. Our weird kid and his girlfriend made a list of people in the school they wanted to sexually assault and kill. Crap got investigated real quick, but I don't know what actual punishment they got. Edit. For everyone asking, no, I was not killed, unfortunately. I also forgot to add that they put in detail exactly how they were going to kill everyone. Edit 2. I was speaking to my boyfriend about this, and he told me that he was actually there when this all kicked off. They were speaking about it in a math class, and him and his friends overheard it. They all started talking about it, and it got out to the teachers, so sorry for any misinformation in the comments. Story 8. Dress like the Queen of England. Hair, shoes, and everything, from elementary to middle. Then dress like a doll for a year. Tried to hook up with everyone, got kicked off stage at a talent show for doing a burlesque routine, would work her sexual prowess into every oral report, and her last year, she came to school 2 times in just a miniskirt and bra. I didn't know her personally at all, but I've kind of suspected she might have been sexually abused or something. Okay, so most public schools that I'm familiar with have some kind of dress code, and I feel like, just showing up to school in her underwear would probably get her ISS or sent home. And who's just letting her walk out of the house looking like this? Kind of weird. Story 9. So, there was a guy at our school when I was a freshman that everyone called Wolfman, who was weird in all the bad ways. He claimed to have superpowers, teleportation, DBZ like energy creation, and whatnot. All the girls said he would just stare at them if they had class with him. He hung around us freshmen and did his best to, quote, flirt with the girls. For an example of his flirting, he once told a girl that while astral projecting, he saw her face on Jupiter. Needless to say, girls stayed away from him. He graduated, though, and his brother started at the school. Now, Wolfman wasn't a tall guy by any stretch of the imagination, maybe 5 feet at most, but his brother was a good foot shorter than him. He looked like he belonged in 3rd grade. Never got any taller. It didn't help that he always wore a child's Goosebumps jacket that made people start calling him Goosebumps. He was even more convinced of his powers than his brother, but at least he was less sexually creepy. But that's all he had going for him. One memorable day, I was in math class, and he started shaking violently. People ignored him, so he started flapping his arms around. Wondering if this was an actual seizure, the girl next to him put her hand on him and asked if he's okay. He growled back, "Take your hand off me. This power is too much to contain." She started yelling at him for faking a seizure, and he went back to normal death stare, forward grumbling about his powers. Story 10. One girl in my grade, at high school, so 4 years from age 12 through 16, cut herself to fill a vial with her own blood and wore it around her neck. Also wore cat ears and tail to school and would chase people around meowing and hissing and trying to scratch them. She was effing fast too, especially when she'd climb up stairs on all fours. In hindsight, maybe some psychological issues at play, but she wasn't ever part of the special needs classes. Just a regular student like the rest of us, I guess. Edit. 1. I have no idea what happened to this young lady after high school. Vanished without a trace. Did some Googling and Facebook stalking tonight, but no dice. 2. No, I won't dox myself revealing my hometown. The town in question wasn't very large, but judging by the amount of people in the comments, a lot of schools worldwide had a student like this. 3. Yes, she was seriously effing fast. Like, you better get your skates on or she's gonna catch you fast. 4. Yes, I realize she very likely had an issue that was undiagnosed at the time. I hope she got the help she needed. 5. No, she was not hot. 6. Many people have mentioned they've heard this exact story on here before. Apologies if you have. I've been a Reddit user for like 3 weeks, so IDK what's new and what's old. Story 11. I'm from a small town. There was this weird kid who was a year older, but he was so weird that even the younger kids would pick on him. I didn't really know him, but I put him in the weird but harmless category. He graduates, then decides to rob the local taco time with a shotgun. Well, it is a small town. The kids working at the taco time all know him, and pretty much everybody in the taco time also knows him. He got 2 years. Ooh, boy, talk about overkill. Taco Time, I'm not familiar with it, but it does sound like maybe a knockoff of Taco Bell. Particularly if it's in a small town, I can't imagine said tacos are very expensive, so robbing it with the shotgun seems like overkill. I think your classmates might have been able to hook you up with a taco or two if you're hungry. Maybe? Story 12. A few days before a pep assembly, anonymously posted signs all over school that said, quote, "The cock is coming." Teachers and school administrators were obviously concerned, but clueless. Smuggled a live roster into the assembly and partway through the opening speech at the assembly, whipped it out over his head as it went ape crap. Entire gym full of kids stood up and started chanting, "Cock! Cock! Cock!" Was not seen at school for a few days after that. Story 13. A new lad in my primary school pretended his real voice was a deep Scottish accent. At some point, he found a piece of broken glass and used it to cut my friend with for some reason, and then we never saw him again. Edit. Just for clarification, the person he cut was a girl, and she came back to school after going to the hospital. Weird kid was never seen again. Edit 2. Further clarification. He didn't always use the deep Scottish voice. Usually he would have a normal sounding voice from what I remember, but then he would say to us quietly, "This isn't my real voice. My real voice is like this," kind of thing. Story 14. One got caught rubbing out under his desk. Another got every girl in our grade to sign a contract before he moved in 3rd grade, saying that if he ever returned, they would owe him one date. This MFer came back in the 11th grade, to every girl's dismay, but forgot about the contracts. Edit. I borrowed Kid 1's phone in like 8th grade as a last resort to look up my math homework. As soon as I typed the P in problem set, I was bombarded with adult content results. Dude didn't even use incognito. In a massive snoop move, I just took a glance at his history and found out that he watched adult content on his phone almost all day. Morning, afternoon, evening. Bonus features. There was another kid who got in trouble for trying to start a fire in the toilet. Unsuccessfully, of course. The next week, he brought supplies and actually did it. Got expelled right quick. That was in 8th grade. There was another kid who decided, in the same bathroom, that he would find a guy peeing in a urinal, then pee on him to assert dominance. He wasn't expelled. That was in 7th grade. Another kid made a Fortnite joke on Facebook about wanting to shoot his friend with a shotgun before acquiring a chug jug. Some mom took it literally and reported a shooting threat to the high school. I'm pretty sure he went to a party because his neighbor let our town Facebook group know that he left his house around the time the police were called. There is a town circle jerk calling for a manhunt. He moved away. 12th grade. Extra double bonus feature. Somewhere in the comments is the story of how I should technically be the richest man in the world. Extra triple bonus feature. I've been thinking about some more of these kids. There was one who was a senior when I was a freshman. We were friendish in gym. One day in the locker room, he told me that he did ketamine while drunk the night before, and his friend shoved a peanut butter jar in his ass. However, he couldn't get it out. You could see the flat part of the lid under his boxers. I have no clue how he managed to make it through a school day like that. After school, he melted butter and poured it into his ass, then squeezed out a massive crap, pulling the jar out in the process. Definitely thought twice before talking to him again, but we were a killer handball team. I met his mom at the hospital. He's in a mediocre black metal band now. Super extra quadruple bonus feature. There was also one kid who I almost killed. It was after nighttime marching band last year. I had a full car of children to drive home, and I managed to wrangle everyone into the car by 10:30 p.m. I'm getting ready to drive out of the lot when I notice an extra speed bump that I didn't remember from before. I slam the brakes before I hit it and get out to inspect it, since I didn't believe that someone built a bump in 4 hours. Lo and behold, it's a body. This weird kid decided to lie down face first in black clothes on black asphalt in the black night. I nudge him with my foot and ask him if he's okay. He's mad, tells me I interrupted his nap, and then walks home. I was a couple inches from ending his life. Yeah, I'm gonna have to call BS on all of these stories, actually. You're just looking for upvotes, and you're not gonna get mine, you scoundrel. Story 15. The weird kid in our school was part of our friend group, so 15 plus years later, we still give him crap about it. During assembly one afternoon, a few weeks from ball or prom, he went up on stage while our entire year was filing into the auditorium and taking our seats. He was part of an AV club. Surprise! So his responsibility was making sure the microphones worked, so nobody questioned why he was up there tinkering with the mic. Anyway, 90% of our year has come in at this point when he starts singing Jumper by Third Eye Blind over a karaoke version of the song he found on LimeWire, and he's changed the "my friend" part of the chorus to the name of the girl he wants to ask out to prom. He gets about halfway through the song before one of the teachers realizes it isn't a joke and gets up on stage to drag him out. Everyone is just sitting there going, WTF. Half the kids don't know the song, and the other half is wondering why he chose it to ask someone out. Turns out the girl he was asking wasn't even in the auditorium yet, so didn't hear his little number. He got detention for a week for being disruptive, but since then we just call him Jumper as a joke, but then it stuck, and I don't think anyone in our friend group has used his name since then. Even during his wedding, you could tell who he went to school with since they'd ask where Jumper or Big J was. So if this took place during the LimeWire era, I mean, we're looking at like 2003 to maybe 2006. And if that's the case, how do half the people in the room not know Jumper by Third Eye Blind? Like, come on, get out more. Turn on the radio or music channel. That song was literally getting blasted everywhere you could possibly go during that time. Story 16. Humped my desk for a solid minute while maintaining eye contact with me, then said, thanks, and just walked away. I'm a guy. This was 15 years ago, on my first day at this new school, and I was just eating lunch at my desk, and this dude just walked up and went to town. No context, no introduction, nothing. Didn't even buy me dinner first. Just wham bam, thank you desk. Story 17. Weird kid, Dan, was obsessed with cute girl, Casey, for several years. She rejected him for several years. On the bus to a field trip, I sat next to him and he was drawing. I glanced over and he was drawing Casey falling off a cliff onto a patch of spikes below. Years later in middle school, he also got super mad and threw a desk across the room in English. Not a small desk either. One of those that's a desk/chair attached hybrid. just effing yeeted it across the room. I was effing terrified. There's a litany of things he did, but those stand out to me. Edit, because I saw another commenter mention something similar. He also jerked off under a desk in detention once. Story 18. This was at university, which makes this even weirder. I studied geology, so we went on a lot of field trips. One time we went to Spain, and I noticed this rather strange girl had a tally chart in the back of her notebook. Now, this girl was odd. She wore all black clothes that were clearly not washed very well. She had bright ginger hair and would have huge spiky plastic jewelry that was usually bright orange, like big spiky plastic necklaces or bracelets. She would pick her nose aggressively in class kind of girl. Anyway, I asked some of the other girls if they knew what the tally in her notebook was about, and they said she was counting the amount of time she had successfully taken a piss while standing up. I don't know about you, but I found this fascinating. I started casually following her one day on our field trip in Spain, and sure enough, she would find somewhere she thought was discreet. It wasn't discreet. I saw everything. She would take her pants fully off, then take a mean piss standing up, the whole time with a demonic smile on her face. Crap was scary. Then she'd put her pants back on, get out her notebook to add another tally mark, then saunter off into the Spanish wilderness to do more geology. It was almost as disgusting as it was mesmerizing. So one day we had a day off to relax and do what we wanted, so everyone agreed we would go to Madrid for the day. So we all get on a big coach and set off. The drive is like 2 hours. 30 minutes in, she starts mumbling to herself about needing the toilet. Everyone around her going quiet as she became more agitated. Eventually, she jumped up and waddled down the aisle to ask the driver to stop. After a bit of arguing and Spanish shouting from the driver, we pull over. The bus doors open, she walks back up the aisle and gets off using the door halfway down the bus. She takes 3 steps away from the door and starts digging a hole like a effing badger in heat. Now, at this point, I think deep down I knew what was about to happen. She's about to take a massive piss right here in front of everyone as the ultimate win/FU to her classmates she clearly hated. But boy, was I wrong. She finished digging her hole. It was quite impressive given how dry the ground was. She turned herself away from the bus, dropped her trousers, and took a squat over the hole. What is this, I thought. Maybe she's too shy for a stand-up piss. Nope. Out comes the most horrific crap from her pasty white a-hole. Like gallons of it. I've never seen so much. The hole she dug, whilst impressive, was not sufficient for the brown mass that spewed forth. She finished, wiped her ass with a small piece of tissue she had in her pocket, and got back on the bus, with the same maniacal grin I saw her have with the wild piss. Everyone was silent. Our professors just staring at each other, clearly thinking, what the F just happened, Jim? Did that girl seriously just unleash a turd tsunami in front of 40 people? The rest of the journey was just silence. I think we were all in shock. We get to Madrid and everyone slowly gets off the bus. Crap Girl starts saying again that she needs the toilet, and everyone turns to look at her. Her bright orange trousers are soaking wet, like she'd been swimming. One of the other students said, Jesus Christ, what the hell happened? And casually as anything, she turns to him and says, the bus ride is too long. I pissed myself. A few times. At this point, I'm losing my mind. What the F, lady? You stopped the bus so you could decimate the landscape. You couldn't have pissed then? You might as well have. I mean, everyone saw your massive dump. I don't think a quick piss would have bothered anyone. Seriously. Anyway, 2 girls took pity and carted her off to a public toilet. The rest of us went to a few museums and had a great day, but it's hard to enjoy, to be quite honest. Madrid's Natural History Museum didn't have the same jovial atmosphere after watching a grown woman crap and piss herself. So maybe this is just me, but like if this is happening, if a girl's taking a dump on the side of the road and giving you like a full frontal piss, OP just is acting like he was closely examining like every second, every detail of this happening. I mean, again, if it's me, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking literally anywhere else but at that. And I think that secretly OP is maybe turned on by this a little bit. You know, following her down an alleyway just to see her take a leak and then staring at her while she's dumping on the side of the road. Yeah, I think you guys were meant for each other. Story 19. This is going to sound ridiculous, but during my senior year of high school, someone took a huge, and I mean inhumanly huge, crap in one of the girls' bathroom toilets that was far too big to be flushed away. Some kid mentioned seeing it, and in no time, somehow, the entire school was made aware and gathered around the bathroom just trying to look at this monstrosity. Picture 50-plus high school kids skipping classes just to try to squeeze into a small woman's room to stare in awe at an infamous crap. The crowd got so big and unruly that the administration finally caught on and banned people from that particular hallway for the rest of the day day under threat of suspension. I like to believe that all of us were just that weird kid on that day. Yeah, so this is a great follow-up to story number 18. Why are people so fascinated with staring at poop? That's weird. I definitely agree with that last sentence, that all of us were the weird kids on that day. Yes, you were. Why are you skipping class to stare at someone's giant turd? That is very strange. Story 20. In 4th grade, a girl ate a whole mechanical pencil next to me. She also regularly ate whole sheets of paper and erasers. The pencil really sticks out in my mind, though. Edit. I totally expected this comment to get buried. Thanks for the rewards. Just to clarify, yes, it was the entire mechanical pencil. She took it apart piece by piece and just kind of crunched all the big parts like a candy bar. This girl also thought she was a horse and would gallop, neigh, and fight anyone who said she wasn't. So this was pretty much expected by the time she was my desk partner. Story 21. In grade 8, this kid would bring a bar of soap with a hole in it and F it in class. We would whisper to him, "Psst, hey, how was it?" He'd give us a grin and a thumbs up while we giggled. That was 32 years ago. Recently found out he's a big shot neurosurgeon in England somewhere. Who would have thought? Edit. So I've been getting messages asking for more details. So usually during French class, as he fancied the French teacher, he would pull out a Ziploc bag from his school bag. Inside it was the MacGyvered soap sex toy. He would take it out of the Ziploc on his lap where it was concealed, and then licked the tip of his index finger, then wiped it around the hole for lubrication. Then he would put the soap bar down in front of his pants and take care of business. Just before he jacked, he would pull the soap out and grab some tissues and shove them down the front of his pants and jack up into the tissues. Then he'd wait for his boner to drop before getting up and throwing the tissues in the trash can. He was a smart kid, so lucky for him, no teacher would ever call on him to stand up and answer a question. Story 22. Sat on my lap to flirt with my best friend. Edit. Full story. My friend, female, was sitting in the library when the weird kid, male, notorious for preying and making girls uncomfortable, saw her. They had never spoken or met at that point. He sat with my friend, started trying to hold her, and kept talking to her. At one point asked her to join his math club. My friend immediately became uncomfortable. She knew where I was eating lunch that day and left to go find me. He followed her. When she found me, also female, I knew something was up because of the look on her face and the fact a guy I've never met was following super closely and talking to her while she gave really clipped answers. My friend sat next to me and the guy sat somewhere else in the room. But then the guy tried to sit between us and ended up sitting on my lap while trying to flirt. I don't remember what I did. I think we both ended up moving seats. A lot of people asked if I was the weird kid. No. The guy in the story became notorious in his university for this creepy behavior. Girls feared him, and memes of him were literally taped to the walls of campus. I think people might even know who this is. Story 23. I remember once in high school, we were on a school camp, which included some low-level spelunking. About 60 of us had to squeeze single file on our hands and knees through a narrow part of the cave, which was about 100 meters long. There is a small section about halfway along which opened up a bit to allow 2 people to sit shoulder to shoulder. Anyway, weird kid got to this section and decided he really needed to poop. Not sure what he had been eating, but it was a runny one. He was at the front of the column, so we all had the pleasure of crawling through the mess he made, because we'd come too far to turn back. Combine that with poor lighting and poor ventilation, and we had a real mess on our hands. I'm sorry, in this situation, there's no such thing as making it too far to turn back. I'm not crawling hands and knees through someone's runny diarrhea. That's gross. You guys go on. If this is a school assignment, I will take the F. Not doing it. Story 24. After one of my female friends rejected his advances, he proceeded to jump off of his roof twice and broke both of his arms. Second thing, he made a wooden weed pipe in woodshop and then tried to smoke out of it in class. Another weird kid, who I might mention probably had cognitive disability, so I don't want to be mean, hid under a bridge in town and drank multiple bottles of Pepto-Bismol, and then went to school acting like he was drunk. He attempted to get people to drink some with him, and then went back to the bridge and tried to light stuff on fire until the police arrived. Another one, a true Looney Tune of a guy, shortly after high school was caught with a large amount of guns in his trunk, rifles, pistols, and all that, and went to prison, jail for a multitude of crimes. Don't even think he was in a gang, just pure insanity drove him to do insane things. Story 25. He was generally very weird and erratic. One day, he extracted a huge slimy booger out of his nose, turned around to me and a friend and told us full of glee, "Guys, look! Then he stuffed it back into his nose. One day I asked him why he was so weird, and he told me with the straightest face, "The jester's cap affords one many liberties." So I don't know if he was just weird or a secret genius, or maybe a bit of both. Story 26. Not weird kid, but kids. Apparently, these three really odd boys went camping together. This is in the flip phone days. Two of them decided to jerk off onto one guy's phone and close the flip phone. Refused to say what happened after that. When I brought it up with him, he said I was number one on his hit list. Said he was going to get a bazooka when he joined the military and come blow me up. They all effed in the woods, apparently, but never fully confirmed. Story 27. Okay, so one kid got dared to put a protractor in his mouth, and he did it curved side first, so naturally it got stuck, and he got sent out of class and had to go to the school office. The same kid got dared to shoot a staple gun at himself, so he went ahead and staple gunned his arm and had to be taken to A&E to get stitches. There were loads of other things he did that I can't remember now, but it got to the point that if someone did something totally stupid and or dangerous, kids in our year began to refer to it as pulling a Hudson after him. Story 28. In 6th grade, the weird kid climbed up a tree and threatened to jump down. No teacher was nearby, and all children around, me included, were like, "Sure, go ahead." Or what do you even want to achieve by that? He was just 3, maybe 4 meters above the ground, so no one really expected a more serious injury. After the students lost interest in him and some hesitation on his side, he climbed back down. So no big deal, right? Wrong. Fast forward 5 years. Same guy climbs on top of a 12-story building and this time actually jumps. I always felt a bit guilty, as our reaction when he climbed up that tree might have encouraged him to do it properly this time. The guy actually survives by hitting the electricity cables from the tram, which softens his fall, but is in a coma for nearly a year with multiple surgeries until he finally wakes up, but will be impaired for the rest of his life. Story 29. Stole a car, crashed it, lost both his legs at 17. A few years later, he did it again, but this time he stabbed one of the Good Samaritans who tried to help him and shot at another one. He then led the police on an 8-hour manhunt through tropical jungle by detaching his prosthetics and hiding under the leaves and mud, and using a makeshift raft to escape downriver under the cover of nightfall. The newspaper the next day read, "Armed and legless." Story 30. This one chick did a bunch of weird crap. We went to the same elementary, middle, and high school, but I'm a year above her, so we were never in the same class. Still, the things I've heard and seen her do include talking in a British accent to herself while in the bathroom, trying to have full-on conversations with Siri, then getting bored and just saying things like "but" to her, sitting across from a group of gay kids and mumbling homophobic stuff to herself, trying to flip a desk or having a full breakdown upon realizing desks are heavy and she's a little girl, and run through the halls doing the can-can with herself. Story 31. Guy in junior high had an unsightly amount of earwax and was obsessed with James Bond, who he claimed to be his uncle. He would loudly proclaim that, quote, "James Bond will kick your ass" to anyone who questioned his affiliation with James Bond, made fun of James Bond in any fashion, or denounced James Bond's skills. He would literally get into fistfights to protect the honor of James Bond. There was also a girl in my elementary school who never wore shoes and was known for her impressive farting skills. I'll never forget the day when our class was sitting on the library floor during a lecture by the librarian, how to handle/read/fold a newspaper. The 90s were weird. It could not have been more boring when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the girl unleashed a massive fart that kept going and going and kept getting louder and louder to the point that the entire class was in full-blown hysterics while the fart continued to rage on. The hero we needed that day. Legend. Story 32. I don't know where to begin. One kid wore a trench coat every day with a ring on every finger and a 6-inch cross necklace. One group wore fur suits most days. One kid stabbed himself regularly for fun. One kid wore a dog collar every day. A lot of crap I can't even explain. I went to a good school that happened to be very accepting of the weird kids, so all of them went to my school. One kid freaked out because a teacher took his phone and he punched a hole in the wall. There were a lot of cat and horse girls. I honestly could go on for days. Edit. It's a small town in Washington. A lot of the kids were just your average weird kids, if that makes sense. But since you want more, we also had the only program for special ed kids in town, and they'd let some attend normal classes. One of them named Brandon would smell girls' hair, and if you let him, tell you for days about how he wanted to F his cat and marry it. There was some girl in a wheelchair who had some bone deformation, so she was only like 3 feet tall and like 100 pounds, and all the weird kids would always date her. 3 to 4 kids who wore clothes that used to be bright colors but had turned brown, one of which it was his choice. He came from a nice house, but he never washed his clothes or showered. He pissed his pants all the time and thought he was a gigolo. Lots of gay dudes that were encouraged to be very flamboyant, like asses hanging out in high heels, teachers had to give them special privileges, stuff like that. The school gave anyone who wanted to be different the ability to do anything they wanted without getting in trouble. A teacher lived in his classroom. That's a whole different story, though. The kid with the trench coat looked like he belonged in Blade Runner. I'm sorry, but you can't lead off a conversation by saying, I went to this great, totally normal school, and then begin to list all these different factions and people that were in attendance. This doesn't sound like a school. This sounds like an insane asylum, and I feel like OOP is probably there for a reason as well. There's no way that you're the only normal person amongst all these freak shows. Sorry, that was kind of mean, wasn't it? Story 33. He put a Christmas beetle up his nose while we were at the local pool for swim lessons. We then had to all leave early on the bus so the principal could drive him to the hospital to get the beetle out. A week later, he did a small speech at the Friday school assembly about his beetle nose experiences and showed off his beetle in a jar. This was around grade 5 or 6 from memory, so 11 or 12 years old. Okay, quick edit. For those that don't know, in Australia we have some beetles that come out around Christmas/summertime and are all majestic as F looking color-wise. Their backs look like those color change paint jobs you see on cars with red and green and purple and whatnot. Mainly a reddy, greeny color though. They're also annoying as F. Story 34. Stabbed another kid in the back at the arcade. Apparently the other kid had sold him some acid, and a week later, still hadn't come down, so he sought revenge. Later, one of my dickhead friends invented what he called, quote, the Lance Dance. It was a sort of a line dance where one group would line up in a row and pretend like they were playing pinball, and another would come up behind them and pretend to stab them in the back. It was performed at a school dance, right in front of the stage while the kid's father, a teacher at the school, was chaperoning. I didn't see it happen, unfortunately. The stabber's name was Lance, which is kind of funny if you think about it. Story 35. I had an autistic friend, and he was afraid of a particular twin. He was minding his own business in the corridors, and each twin was walking towards each other at different ends of the corridor, with him in between. Frightened, he did what no one would expect. Jump out the window! He was on the 3rd floor. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt that bad. When my teacher asked him why he did that, he said, quote, my life was under grave danger, and I only did what was imperative to be done. To this day, I don't know why he was afraid of them. Story 36. He showed up to our year 12 formal, prom, in a coffin, in the back of a hearse, dressed like Gerard Way circa 2005. The driver pulled up, opened the back doors off the hearse, pulled the coffin out on rollers, lowered it, then opened it. Up popped a weird guy in a black suit with a red tie. He had shoulder-length black hair, slightly oily. He even did his makeup for the occasion. Super white face with red eyeshadow. My best friend at the time got a huge lady boner and made out with him for most of the night. You could tell because she had a huge patch of super pale foundation all around her mouth. I think gross. Story 37. They committed self-unalive after finding out they wouldn't be graduating because he was failing a class by 3 points. He wasn't a bad student. He was passing his other classes with B's and C's. They didn't tell him because his counselor wasn't at school at the time, and the website didn't update to show he was failing. So he was able to buy a graduation gown and go to this award thing before rehearsal, and then the next day finds out right there that he wasn't graduating. Story 38. Peed herself in class. But instead of getting up and leaving the room to clean herself up, she wrapped her jumper around her hips and sat back down, stewing in her pee for another 40 minutes or so. Another one was a guy. He spent recess lying on his back, looking at the sky while curling and uncurling his index finger, muttering to himself. Story 39. He wasn't so much weird, just very, very anarchic. We were really good mates. We went to a special needs school due to our disabilities. The school was for kids with physical disabilities and mild behavior disorders. One lunchtime, we were all feeling bored. Well, Jamie was. All the classes sat together for lunch in a massive room specifically set out for mealtimes. We all had to wait for everyone else to finish before going out to play. Our table was mostly well behaved and had really good table manners. Suddenly, Jamie announced he was so bored, and if he couldn't be excused to be able to run around, he would do something naughty. The dinner ladies obviously didn't listen to this, as you just can't let kids dictate what they want to do. So he was firmly told to sit still and be good. A few minutes later, without warning, he picked up a leftover pea from his plate and, to the complete joy of us other kids, shoved it up his right nostril and snorted the pea out of his nose. The pea shot across the dinner room, hitting one of the teachers on dinner duty in the face. As you can imagine, this sent our entire table into uncontrollable fits of hysteria, being between 8 and 10 years old. As you might have guessed, our bad behavior got us all in severe grief, and Jamie's parents were phoned up and informed about his wayward behavior. As an afterthought, this was the same kid who favored eating blue paint over red because it apparently tasted better? Yeah, story 40. So, one of the more grave things that happened in my school, from 6 years to 12 years, not English, so bear with me. Because our school was mixed, and to keep things fair, boys couldn't put off their t-shirts, even when it was blazing hot. But one day, a certain kid named Jimmy Cavalier, that didn't care much for rules, decided that he wasn't going to wear that bloody t-shirt when he was playing soccer under the hot sun. So he went naked. Marie, the overseer to the playground, spotted this. She was known for being strict with the rules and yelling at kids for not obeying her rule of terror. She also had a whistle, which she would vehemently use in her quest for rule and order. So, as she does, she started blowing that thing and caught the attention of the whole playground to this specific situation with Jimmy. These two were complete antipoles and had butted heads before on many occasions. But in this occasion, it was quite clear that Jimmy didn't want to take no crap from Marie. In defiance, he ran away shirtless into the buildings of the school, cartoonishly followed by Marie, who shouted he needed to come to her. Now, you have to know that our school hallway had windows that provided a view from the playground, so we could see Jimmy run towards his class. Marie lagged behind maybe 10 to 15 meters. We were not sure what was going to happen, but then Jimmy checked his book bag for something we couldn't notice. Seconds later, we saw Marie making a quick 180 and running away, followed by a fuming Jimmy that had apparently reached for his box full of marbles. Now, most kids had glass marbles, but not Jimmy. Because his dad was in mechanics, pretty much his entire collection consisted of metal-bearing balls. And you'd think they were probably small ones, but not Jimmy's. Long story short, Jimmy got suspended for life, later getting into drug dealing and got killed in a bad deal several years later. That guy was crazy talented. He could draw an entire landscape in perfect detail by just looking at it for a few minutes. But he just did not comply. A contrarian amongst contrarians. Sometimes I think that guy would have been the greatest artist of our little country, but I found out later his situation at home was really crappy. And that day he went completely over the edge. I'll never forget this. It's a tragic start to the downfall of Jimmy, who was actually a good friend of me at the time. A great mind. He told me stuff I didn't understand for years to come. R.I.P. Jimmy. Story 41. The list of things this mad lad did would fill a whole yearbook, but here's some of the highlights. Dumped 5 liters of cooking oil into the school pool and set it on fire. He got suspended for that one. Managed to cause a power outage to half the town because he accidentally broke a power transformer on the school grounds. Still have no idea how he pulled that one off. Forced an evacuation of the school by setting off firecrackers in all the rubbish bins. Groundskeepers spent 3 weeks scraping melted plastic off the concrete. Forced a lockdown by calling the school with a fake bomb threat to get out of doing a test. He still had to do the test. And finally, in senior year, he was caught doing the horizontal hula with his missus by the principal during school hours. The place they were going at it like rabbits? The toilet in the staff-only section of the school grounds. Both got expelled for that, and she ended up pregnant from what I remember. Okay, viewers, listeners, can we all agree in solidarity to keep the term horizontal hula going as long as possible? That's hilarious. Never heard it before, but yeah, let's get that horizontal hula trending. Story 42. He said he was Sonic the Hedgehog. When someone asked his name, he would say, "I'm Sonic," and run away as fast as he could. He even wrote his name as Sonic on homework and tests. Most people never knew his real name. Edit. This does not take place in the US, sadly, so it's most likely that the person you're thinking of isn't the same one I'm referring to. I'd like to hear your stories, though. Story 43. 1. Drew hentai-style cartoon images of all the girls in the class. We all had cat ears, a foxtail, and gigantic boobs. They were surprisingly awesome drawings, if you excuse the fact that they were hentai. 2. Stripped naked in class because he wanted to make the substitute teacher shut up. 3. Pretended to have diabetes because he wanted to eat lollies in class. Even went so far as to drink liters of water so they'd urinate more frequently. Bought in blood glucose monitors and everything to check his sugars. Was caught at parent-teachers interviews when his homeroom teacher commended him on how well he managed his disease, only to have the parents inform him that he was not in fact diabetic. 4. Spoke on end about how his life aim was to own a dragon. Could not be convinced that they were not real. He was 17 at the time. 5. Conducted a survey amongst the girls to find out who was still a virgin. Propositioned each virgin as he would only FVs. Explained that his reasoning was because he had a small penis after contracting an illness which stunted its growth. He failed to find any takers. 6. Set fire to his leg hairs to prove he was a man. Cried. 7. Tried to guilt girls into giving him a BJ after bullying incidents. As in, he would pretend he was so sad about being bullied, and the only way he'd ever be happy is if someone blew him. I don't think anyone gave him a reason to smile, ever. And 8. Superglued his eyelids shut on a dare. Had to go to hospital. Was lucky he didn't blind himself. Story 44. Okay, so in elementary school, there was this guy called Eduardo. He was a funny Mexican guy, and we called him Lalo. Lalo always had a bad breath, but a particular smell that I still can remember. It was sour, and not as disgusting as you may think, but it was unpleasant. The kids in my group used to refer to him as Sour Mouth because of this. Maybe it was his diet, or God knows what kind of buccal infection he had, but he was known for that. Last time I checked him on Facebook, and now he is a bodybuilder. Good for him, I guess. I wonder if he managed to solve his breath problem. Story 45. He hung himself. I didn't know him and his sister well. They lived a few homes up from mine. Despite the exterior looking normal, they were living in squalid conditions. I remember him knocking in the door and asking to play. I declined. Didn't really know him at all, and it was late in the evening. I guess that was the final straw. The next evening, he was discovered. The neighborhood sat on a massive hill, with each home plot seeming like a stack, one after another in layers. He had a dog runner in the backyard that a long cord would connect to. He shortened the cable and tied it around his neck. He ran from the top of the hill and jumped, gliding down the cord to the lowest part of the yard where he was suspended. Story 46. I went to 7th grade, roughly age 11 to 12, with a kid called Josh, who was always a little different from the rest of us. There were a lot of bullies at school, and since Josh was a ginger, sometimes he got singled out. But instead of withdrawing and hiding like I did, he did crazy crap. He would fold his upper lip down so his front row of teeth stuck out, then bug out his eyes and speak in a high chipmunk voice. He once chased me around the room with a pair of scissors trying to cut my hair. He was obsessed with Itchy and Scratchy and would quote them all the time. He wrote "shut up" on his eyelids with a pen and blinked at all the teachers. When we dissected a frog, our teacher made the mistake of telling us that the eyes would bounce. Everyone looked immediately at Josh, who grinned, bounced an eye off the table, and ate it. But his most infamous trick was the bear kill kill. I don't know where the phrase came from, but it was one of those things he said whenever he wasn't getting enough attention, and it meant something crazy was about to happen. One day, probably the scissor chase day, we were winding down for the end of the day. Josh had been oddly quiet, so we hadn't really been paying any attention to him. Then, one of the kids screamed, and we turned around to see blood dripping off his arm. He had taken a pair of blunt school scissors and had painstakingly carved bear kill kill into his forearm without any of us noticing. I don't remember what the teacher did, which also disturbs me as this incident should have set off a flurry of activity. After that, the incident was never mentioned again. Josh showed up with a bandage the next day, and things continued. After that year, I was moved to a different school for unrelated reasons, and I never saw Josh again. A year later, I heard that he had moved to Kentucky to live with his much older brother. His mom had died when he was born, so it was just his dad taking care of him. His dad was a doctor and worked all the time, so Josh rarely saw him. One day, his dad didn't show up or call in to work. No one could get him on the phone. His office called the police, and when they arrived, they found Josh still asleep. In their infinite wisdom, they decided to make Josh go into his dad's bedroom to check on him. Josh walked in to discover his father in bed, dead of a surprise heart attack. I remember we all talked about Josh in hushed tones like he was some kind of legend. It wasn't until I was older that I started to wonder whether his craziness was just his way of dealing with a chaotic and lonely life. I try to look him up on Facebook periodically, but I've yet to find him. Hope you're okay, Josh. Story 47. Oh man, where to start? Jerked off under the table during history. Often, threatened me with a knife while I was on a walk with a friend, threatened to hire someone to fight me. I remember he regularly pissed off every kid in school, and I don't know how many times I have to save him from getting beat up. I almost want to say that he deserved every ass kicking that he almost got. Another kid seemed fully convinced that he was a Time Lord from Doctor Who. Same kid was the kid that hisses at other people. It's 4 a.m. and I can't remember a lot of them, but those were some big ones that stood out. So let me get this straight. This kid threatened you with a knife and threatened to hire someone to beat you up, but you're peeling people off of him that want to beat his ass? How very noble. I probably would have just let him burn. I think most people would have. Story 48. So this involved two. The first we'll call Roger, and the second we'll call Nathan. Roger had a tendency to wear a trench coat to school every day and a fedora. He would even wear shorts with his trench coat and never seemed to understand how that could make him look like a flasher. Nathan, on the other hand, grew his hair out very long and never washed it. One day in band, Roger, trumpet, was behind Nathan, trombone, and kept loudly trumpeting next to Nathan's ear. Nathan yelled at Roger to stop, which prompted Roger to blow as loud as he could in Nathan's ear. Nathan wheeled around and struck Roger with his trombone. Roger leapt, trenchcoat and all, over a chair and, wielding his trumpet, proceeded to clash with Nathan's trombone. This swashbuckling scene of musical violence continued for a minute or two while they screamed at each other and the band teacher yelled at them to stop. Eventually they calmed down after one of their mutual friends yelled at them that they might be kicked out of the after-school Yu-Gi-Oh club. Story 49. Wes was awesome. We went to a really small rural school. He started my grade in sophomore year. His parents were hippies. He was super pale. Pale, blonde, semi-curly mullet. Very quiet, very intelligent. Last day of our senior year, really. One teacher has Rock Band set up in his room, and Wes grabs the mic and just annihilates Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. Was awesome. Then quietly puts the mic down and goes to play D&D. Story 50. I had the locker next to the weird kid one year. One day we're both at our lockers, and he's dramatically searching through his locker like Indiana Jones. When he suddenly slams it shut, turns towards me and asks, "You know what?" I turn to look at him and say, "What?" He shows me his left hand, which has a bedazzled white glove on it. My mom says that I can fly off bridges while wearing this glove. We were like 17, and I think he just then realized his mom was trying to get him to jump off a bridge. Story 51. Cried, wailed, and sobbed in the bathroom for hours. Loudly. We were in primary school, so can't remember what age exactly, but 9 to 10, maybe maximum 11. We had a boys' toilet and girls' toilet in the back of the classroom. The doors had openings along the bottom and top, so sound traveled through to the classroom. I just remember so clearly, he was wailing, crying, and the teacher just had to keep teaching us. It was such weird behavior as it was recurring, so that's why the behavior was ignored by the teacher. I hope that dude's okay now. His home seemed really stable from the outside, so I know I'm not the only one. When the poster said that sound traveled like through the stall, I was thinking that someone was going to be in there just taking a massive dump and just blowing it out, right? I'm not the only one thinking about that. Crying, yeah, I guess that makes for a decent story, but surely you also have some stories of, little Johnny excusing himself to go to the bathroom and just hearing him. Yeah. Story 52. This weird kid jerked off in the history class, and this other kid used to draw people in this little journal and write notes about them and keep the journal in his jacket pocket. He was in my cooking class freshman year of high school, and I almost stole the journal to look at it. Extra story for whoever's reading. This one kid would wear this curry jersey and would spill milk and juice on the table and use the jersey as his rag, then put it back on and never washed it. What high school are you going to that has a cooking class? I gotta get on board with that. Story 53. The year is 2009. It's my very first day of public school after being homeschooled for 10 years. I'm starting 10th grade. I wander my way into the cafeteria and sit at a table with my twin brother, who's virtually the only person I know. At this point, I assume that I am indeed the weird kid. Suddenly, Naruto Nate, named for the way he did the arms back sprint, and his girlfriend, Kitty Gilbert, cat girl, tail, ears, hissing, the works, held hands and jumped from the second floor library balcony all the way down onto a table in the cafeteria. They crashed straight through a folding table, which caused everyone's food to be flung in toward the center. The force of the kids sent food flying far enough to hit other tables, which initiated a real-life food fight. I will never forget the feeling I had right then. I thought, oh my God, public school is just like the movies. Yes! Story 54. He got in a fight with this other kid that no one liked. This kid was rich. His mom worked at a high-end law firm, and his dad was a chemical engineer. And he was somewhat smart, which allowed him to have a few friends. But they all crap-talked him behind his back because he was just annoying and tried to start fights with everyone and flex his high grades and designer clothes. Supreme, Bape, and Yeezys every day. The weird kid was this kid with a thick accent who constantly talked about his favorite adult content and always had a tab of hentai open on his phone at all times. So this weird kid got mad at the annoying kid because he stole his phone and texted his mom a bunch of sexual things, which resulted in the weird kid stealing the annoying kid's iPad Pro and emailing a bunch of hentai pages and curse words to his mom. Except it wasn't his mom, it was his mom's boss, client, and coworker. Both these kids spent a whole day yelling at each other and flat out breaking down in the lunchroom. It was like seeing two Greek gods fight and cripple each other. Story 55. He was caught effing a pumpkin when he had some friends sleeping over. It was around Halloween and they had the pumpkins by a radiator, which kept them warm. Anyways, he must have became adept at carving holes in them after making some jack-o'-lanterns, because at some point he snuck downstairs and went to town on one. One of his friends saw it and couldn't keep it to himself, and word got around. Me and that particular guy never got along personally, but one snowy night during college I saw him, a well-groomed young man now, eating at a diner with his girlfriend. When she went into the bathroom, I told him I had to admit that he found himself a very fine girlfriend. He smiled, agreed, and thanked me. That smile disappeared as I said, "Yep, she has an ass like a pumpkin." Then he started begging me not to tell her about the incident. But I was lonely and hateful those days, and without a girlfriend myself, I felt, why should Pumpkin effer have someone to date and not me? I walked towards the bathroom and said I was telling her. She had to know. Then the dude effing leaped at me. I tried to dash away, but he grabbed my ankle and started pulling my leg, just like I'm pulling yours now. Story 56. He killed himself. For years and years, he was always made fun of, and one year I guess he just couldn't take it anymore. One day he didn't show up, and then it was confirmed he never would. Had a big impact on the way I perceived bullying and how people go through depression. I mean, everyone gets made fun of, but sometimes kindness and positivity can go a long way. People can only take so much before ultimately the weight is too much to carry. Story 57. In high school, we had a kid that had Asperger's. He wasn't really weird. He was very positive and fun, but there's something I'll never forget. The kid was in love with trains for some reason, and one day came to me with a metal fork in his hand and wanted to show me a trick. He goes to an outlet, pointing the fork at it, and says to me, "Hey, Polar, somebody told me if I stick the fork in the outlet, I'll become the best conductor ever." Never in my life have I stopped someone so fast, and I was struck with the face of disbelief and trying not to laugh at the joke, because I like dark humor. Then the guy starts laughing and he tells me it was a prank. Effing hell. I got played by the Asperger's kid, but in my mind, I thought I'll see him die in front of me. I won't ever forget that. Story 58. It wasn't what he'd done in school, more what he'd done after. This kid always stank and always be fascinated during dissection classes in biology. By 14, he was an active hunter and could skin a deer in under 10 minutes with an almost perfect pelt. We thought he would grow up to be a serial killer, but instead he grew up to dedicate his life to being a foster dad who takes in the least privileged kids. I found out via a conversation with him a few years ago at a mutual friends party that he was neglected as a kid, and his weird hobbies that made him the weird kid was how he ate because his parents didn't feed him regularly, so he now takes in kids in a similar situation to give them a good life. Story 59. I was the weird kid, and I read books. I watched sci-fi and Britcoms on Saturday night on PBS, and once wore a 70s-era maroon leisure suit that I found tucked in the back of my stepdad's closet to school because I could. I also freaked the F out of my teacher in home EC because we did that assignment where you have to carry around a doll or a bag of flour or an egg for a couple weeks because you're learning what it's like to be a parent, and I flat out refused to name a father on the baby's birth certificate. And this was after my teacher had said, "You can't name your baby that," and I disagreed. I named him Elvis after having a long, private discussion with myself over whether I wanted a boy or a girl, and if I had a girl, if I should name her Evita Duarte de Perón, my last name. I ended up picking Elvis, ultimately, because it actually fit on the, name goes here, space, on the fake birth certificate. I am not Argentinian, but I do love Broadway musicas, and Evita has always been one of my favorites. Story 60. The weird trenchcoat mafia kid actually screamed at a kid, "I'm going to come to school tomorrow and shoot you." The next day, while he was suspended, our school went into lockdown because someone with a gun was apparently on campus. Turns out the person with a gun was a suspect running from the police, completely unrelated. But for a good 2 hours there, we all thought we were really in the next Columbine. Story 61. Kid just had a ridiculously awful temper. So easy to get him mad. Usually the first thing you say to someone who went from 0 to 100 in seconds is, "Calm down." Everyone says it. It's just a knee-jerk response. Teach would say that to a kid, he just screamed, "I'm not calmed up!" so loud that you could hear that crap from outside. Every single time. Don't know why he said it, especially given he was very obviously ticked off when he'd scream it. He would also just roam the halls when he was supposed to be in class, go up to every single door and just peek through the little glass window until the teacher would ask him to leave. Got to the point where no teachers would ask him to leave because then he'd just sit there tapping on the glass. One teacher decided to try going out there after he kept tapping the glass, and this kid literally put all of his strength and weight into keeping the door closed. Teacher couldn't open it. We ended up having to stay after the bell because the kid wouldn't leave and the teacher had to call for the principal. Luckily, the principal was usually pretty good at talking him down. The days he wasn't there were very bad days and everyone could hear them screaming at each other. Seeing the kid around a few times after graduating seems normal enough. Story 62. This is kind of traumatic to me still, so bear with me. She brought a kitten to school in a strawberry container. You know those thin plastic 4x4 ones with holes? That. She took me to the bathroom stall and pulled out this kitten out of her backpack, wrapped in a jacket and in the container. It was meowing. I was shocked. She said, "Don't tell," because her grandma would beat her. So I'm in like 3rd grade. I have a moral conundrum that an 8-year-old shouldn't. Save a kitten and get my friend beat? Or let her take the kitten and let her get beat anyway? I told on her. I couldn't bear to stand that kitten in there, even at that age. Now looking back with more understanding, I don't remember if it survived. I really hope it didn't die of dehydration or suffocation. It looked really young, definitely like 4 or 5 weeks. So no milk in that environment? Horrifying. Story 63. Wind pants, we called him. The guy would wear wind pants every day to school, and while in class, would insert his hand into his pocket and jerk off under his desk. I don't think I'll ever forget hearing that unique sound in the midst of silence while everyone was quietly reading. The funniest part was our teacher would typically shake everyone's hand and say good morning before we entered the classroom. Then, Wind Pants would be up next in line and she straight up refused to shake his hand, stating that she, quote, had a cold. LOL. She knew. Story 64. Kid in my French class told the teacher he was late because he had been catching a mouse on the way to school. This was in first year of high school in Scotland. Not sure what the equivalent is elsewhere. Teacher refused to believe him. We all thought he was talking crap too. He was adamant it was a true story and offered to show the teacher the mouse in his bag. Teacher peered in the bag and nearly jumped out the window when he saw the real mouse in the guy's bag. I can't remember what happened next, but I'm pretty sure he was asked to go home for the day. Story 65. He would crap on things that should not be shat on. My high school was massive, like almost 1,300 kids in my graduating class. Massive. Currently houses something like 8,000 kids. Anyway, for 2.5 years, people would find crap in places, like pressed between the pages of library books, underneath cabinets, in sinks, weird places that you couldn't necessarily actively crap in. Rather, you'd have to crap somewhere, then move said crap to the new location. After 2.5 years, the librarian was walking through this, sky bridge thing that had a display case of World War II Lego dioramas and caught this kid. Ziploc baggie full of his own crap, trying to, smush it into this case. As soon as he was caught, the kid fessed to everything. Turns out, he was profoundly disturbed and thought that by smearing his crap over the entire school, he'd established some sort of control over it. He even had a map of the campus with all the locations he'd smeared his crap in planned locations. Story 66. The new kid who transferred into our hick country school dressed like a parody of every 1950s sitcom dad. Cardigans, button-down shirts, slacks, and worst of all, a pipe. He then almost immediately tried buying drugs from the drug trade kids. Legit trade, not the casual users, which got him labeled narc and undercover cop because nothing says, "Hello, fellow kids," like a teenager dressed like he's 50, and harassed daily. He ultimately hung himself in a stall in the upstairs boys' room. The non-weird new guy, Odo, who was charming and cute, turned out to be a spree killer who sexually assaulted and murdered a convenience store clerk, then brought her jewelry to school the next day and handed it out to random girls. Story 67. He had some issues that weren't being addressed. This was the early 90s, and my school didn't handle mental problems well. He was having a meltdown, and the teacher couldn't calm him down. She got the principal, and the kid hated her, so he started getting worse. They both were physically holding this child down in his seat. Well, he didn't want to be touched, but couldn't communicate, so he started biting them. They let go to try to figure out how to deal with him. So he flipped his desk over and hit the back of the kid in front of him. This was a good kid. He just wasn't handled well or really able to handle mainstream schooling. It was sad to see, honestly. Story 68. I remember a kid in first grade had violent/destructive tantrums that culminated in him crying one day, getting ignored, then violently head-desking. He broke his nose, cut up his forehead, and bled everywhere, much to the horror of the teacher and the whole class. 911 was called. He was taken away. Never heard of the dude again. There was one kid in middle school who loved MILFs, and made it a point to tell you how he was going to F your mom. Not, "I effed your mom," haha, but "I'm going to stick my fingers in her puss and make her moist, lube her up and go to town." My mom heard one of these interactions. The description was towards her. She got the teacher involved, then got a few other parents, who reported, but nothing ever happened, to open a case on the child's parents. I wasn't sure what happened there, but I'm pretty sure that kid was taken by the state with what they found. My high school was filled with effed up crap, lol. I remember one girl's older brother took himself out sometime after their mom passed, and a weird kid straight up told her she may as well kill herself too, on social media. He didn't delete it, got suspended, then expelled, then charged, then sent to another school. I think the ones for the kids with mental problems. I remember eventually seeing him in college, and nothing changed. He said the school just became a super easy A, and he had enough time to dick around. Anyways, I'm pretty sure he's under the FBI's eye for some effing crap. No one in our group that knows him really knows if he would have done it. Dude's a effing troll. There was a guy who we were pretty sure was abused at home. Quiet, didn't bother anyone, was afraid of people in our class. He was a grade younger, but wasn't sure what was wrong with him. He was constantly bullied and tormented by some girls on our bus, every morning at 6. One morning, he came to school extra quiet, and the girl started effing with him again. And he pulled a knife out on her. Got expelled almost immediately. I was on a college tour with friends, so I only heard about this. He's in jail now for attempted manslaughter. Small other bits from high school. We had a kid who enticed the younger classes by being such an oddball that he became their Jesus. He shaved everything for graduation, eyebrows included. We had a school Harlem Shake when that was popular. Someone took a crap in the hallways. A kid was caught jerking off to the health teachers in class, and one got stuck in an effing railing. So let's just back up real quick to the kid that's obsessed with MILFs. How did nobody just beat this kid into a pulp? If you're making a joke about fingering my mom and making her wet, I'm not laughing at that like my fist is going into your throat. Story 69. There was a girl in special ed in my high school who would come up to me and tell me that I'm a silver dragon from the planet Shindoria, destined to help the Empress Kalar defeat the Hunters. Whenever she'd get injured while battling said Hunters, she'd hug me tightly because I had, quote, healing powers. I played along with it for a while, but then I had to put a stop to it when she would follow me everywhere, including my locker, my class, often during testing. She even tried to follow me home, and I ended up giving her a fake address and number. Still, I have to admit, I admired the effort she put into trying to fit in and integrate with the normal kids, unlike most of the special ed kids who mainly kept to themselves.